Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about one of the most, buzzworthy films of the year, Moana 2. I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So in recent years, I think family audiences have developed a somewhat complicated relationship with Disney. I think like the failures of the once invulnerable studio have received plenty of attention, and I think not undeservingly so. But there have also been some, I think, undeniable hits along the way. Frozen may be the most popular, but in my humble opinion, the best of like the modern Disney flicks is 2016's Moana. I think with very endearing characters, of fantastic collection of songs, and just a very entertaining adventure story. To me, the movie was just a total delight, and that film was about like journeying into uncharted seas. But sometimes, particularly when you're a floundering movie studio, it's perhaps a bit more prudent to return to familiar shores. And Moana 2 is a wholesome and I think enjoyable sequel, but despite retreading many of the same like narrative beats as the original, it's just never able to recapture the same magic. And the sequel is also just navigated a very unusual route to reach the big screen. A follow-up to Moana was first conceived, I think, back in 2020 as like a multi-episode streaming series for Disney Plus, before eventually being like reworked as a theatrical release. And despite sort of the theatrical glow up, Moana 2 still just feels like a streaming show at times. For the most part, like the animation does look first rate and like up to modern standards, but kind of beyond the visuals, there's just a clear dip in quality in really most other areas, whether that's the story or characters or jokes or music. And the story also just unfolds in kind of episodic, almost disjointed at times fashion, making it easy to kind of imagine where the initial episode breaks would have been. But as a parent myself, I understand that for many of you, the most pressing question is not, is this film artistically excellent, but rather just, will this entertain my child for a few hours? And I think the answer to that question is yes. I think Moana 2 is a perfectly passable animated adventure. I took my two 9-year-old sons with me to the screening, and both had a great time with this movie, as did several young girls in the theater with us. And I do think there's enough charm for us parents as well. And for Christian parents who aren't spooked away by the story's mythological and spiritual elements, I think Moana 2 is wholesome entertainment without any of the unwanted surprises that kind of modern Disney has unfortunately become known for. Still, I think given the caliber of the original film and nearly a decade of waiting for Disney to craft Moana's next adventure, I think audiences are also justified in just hoping for something a bit more inspired. Because to me, Moana 2 feels almost more like a sequel that is mandated by executives off in a Hollywood boardroom with year-end finances in mind, rather than a project that's just birthed from the creative genius of very inspired storytellers. I think it's enjoyable, but it just lacks the same sort of innovative energy of the first film. And starting its life as a streaming show meant that not all of the original creatives were able to return for the sequel, and I think no absence is more strongly felt than Lin-Manuel Miranda, the man responsible for what I think are some of Disney's best songs in years with the original Moana, including hits like How Far I'll Go or You're Welcome. Abigail Barlow and Emily Bear take the songwriting reins for Moana 2, but they're just unable to reach the same kind of musical heights. I think there are a few decent songs, such as kind of the central tune Beyond, and the very playful What Could Be Better Than This, or even Maui's new kind of solo song, Can I Get a Chi Who, but just none of them have the same sort of infectious sing-along quality or memorability really as anything from the original movie. And in one sense, the story does feel a bit overstuffed to me, perhaps another byproduct of its episodic, longer form roots, with a lot of exposition dumps early on, and even several characters and story elements that are kind of dropped, and never revisited. But at the same time, the plot also follows remarkably close to the original film. Thus, Maui is once again, introduced by Moana saving him from captivity, and there's a near identical conflict with the Kakamora, or the coconut pirates from the original, and even a third act that sees Moana needing to sail through stormy waters to release a magical island from the powers of a large, angry deity. I think there's obviously nostalgic comfort in familiarity, but to me, I think such similar narrative can make Moana 2 feel a bit like Disney singing karaoke, kind of offering a new rendition on a far superior original. And the main difference between the two films is that Moana is now 3 years older, kind of having already matured and completed her initial hero's journey. I think as a character, Moana remains very winsome, just with her very spunky resilience and just bubbly optimism. And she takes on a more leadership role this time, charged with taking a crew of quirky individuals along with her for the adventure. And I think all the new crew members, they're fine, but they're just continually like overshadowed by the returning legacy characters. And I think the character of Maui feels particularly like underutilized in this film and really doesn't intersect with Moana until like well into the runtime. And kind of that relational dynamic between Maui and Moana that was like the heart of the original story remains a highlight of the sequel. It's just that they're given a lot less time together and kind of as a result of the more expanded cast of what I think are just much less interesting characters. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this, like I said, really not a whole lot going on in this movie. For language, the only thing that jumped out to me is one character says "sucka," and then later says, nobody wants to suck at their job, but nothing kind of crude or profane beyond that. Violence, just sort of harmless, cartoon, action scenes, but nothing to be concerned about. For sexuality, there is one kind of young man who seems like infatuated with the demigod Maui, although it appears, at least to me, to be clearly sort of hero worship rather than anything kind of romantic. The only other kind of content thing is just like this movie does expand on, on the mythology of the first film with plenty of talk about, gods and demigods and, just other spiritual beings. I think there's also just frequent kind of Polynesian culture and like religious influences with a very strong emphasis on like the ancestors whose spirits still kind of speak to the characters and guide them, sometimes in like, visible ghostly form. As far as themes, worldview, this thing's going on beneath the surface. To me, this movie's kind of central motif is just about being connected. Kind of that theme plays out on like a global level with Moana's position as a wayfinder, just her mission to like connect all the peoples of the ocean together. But sort of like the importance of like unity and community is also explored in like the more like limited context of the adventure itself. Because unlike the first film in which Moana like left her island community to set off on her quest alone, this time she is accompanied by like a diverse trio of fellow adventurers, and the crew like begins like as a collection of individuals, each focused on their own interests and strengths, until Moana, through the help of a few musical numbers, fashions them into a more like harmonious team, working together as one. Each member does like retain their individual quirks, but they just learn to use their talents to contribute more to like the communal unit. And obviously, as Christians, we know that the Bible urges Christians to be, perfectly unified in mind and thought, that we were created to exist in community, like each individual as an important, like valuable part of the larger body. Kind of another theme that's maybe a bit more like murky for parents is that like one of, I think, Moana's most endearing qualities has been her like very stubborn resilience. And as with the first film, kind of perseverance is a prominent theme this time, although maybe explored in a way that may make some parents a bit more uncomfortable, because there's a song called Get Lost, which is like originally presented as a classic Disney villain song, but like the singer is ultimately revealed to have a bit more like sympathetic motivations. And the lyrics of that song include, refrains such as "Get lost, cut loose, and lose your way. There ain't no fun in holding back, babe. You gotta enjoy the thrill of living dangerously. You've got a long, long way to go. Keep playing it safe and you'll never know. The rules are ours to break. Come on, babe. It's time to get lost." And I think like taken at face value, some parents may not be overly thrilled to have their, children embracing that song too literally. But I do think like in the context of the wider film, the song is more of like a challenge, just simply to like not give up. Because like the specific lesson that Moana gleams from that encounter is the realization that there's always another way. I think less like an anthem about just living rebelliously. I think Moana 2 attempts to offer a message just about not giving up, but kind of boldly and like relentlessly pressing forward to find a solution. And I think Christians can affirm like that message. Scripture does say in James 1:12, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him." So in the end, I think, whether audiences find Moana 2 to be smooth sailing or bumpy water may depend on like how they manage their expectations. I think parents just looking for safe, animated entertainment, or kids who simply want to see their favorite heroine back on the big screen should find what they're looking for here. On the other hand, I think audiences seeking another inspired Disney classic will be left just wanting a little bit more. Because unfortunately, at least to me, I think Moana's second adventure is more akin to like the prior direct-to-video days of, the Return of Jafar or Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, than it is the more recent, like, inventively built upon the original days of Inside Out 2. The CE may be calling Moana to find out just how far she'll go, but if there is to be a Moana 3 on the horizon, I just hope she'll answer that call with a little bit more urgency, leaving behind the familiar shores to explore something exciting and new. But hey, I would love to hear what you guys think. If you guys are taking your kids, or hey, you're just a grown up and hey, you like Disney movies, no shame there. Don't be shy. Jump into the comment section. Let's have a conversation about it. Encourage you guys too, if you haven't done so, become a Collider, subscribe to the channel, and let's have other movie reviews, got our Faith and Pop Culture podcast, got interviews, just other fun stuff. Would love to have you guys be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.